Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Heights podcast. Today we have a special guest, Erika Vinnett. Is that how you pronounce the last name?
It is.
Vinnett?
It is, yep.
Okay. Yeah. So I actually met Erika at a Legatus event. Her and her husband are a part of Legatus organization. So I met them in Nashville when I was giving a talk, and then they invited me over for dinner. And one day when I was teaching at a high school, I saw Erika actually in the high school out of the blue.
Yeah.
And then I was like, why are you here? And she said, well, I'm telling my story of when she was younger and she was pregnant, and I had no idea. And I had dinner with you guys, and you told me the story, and I thought it'd be awesome to have her on the podcast to share her story. So before we get into that, if you could just tell the viewers just a little bit who you are,
Okay.
maybe where you're from,
Yeah.
your background.
Absolutely. So I am from Nashville. I'm a unicorn, so I hear, because we are so rare. Those of us who still live here, I am first and foremost a child of God. And within that identity, I am a wife to my high school sweetheart, and I'm a mother to 5 beautiful children, 4 of whom we are raising, and one who is a saint in heaven who I ask her to pray for us all the time. And I am a nurse by trade, but I am no longer practicing. After all the silliness and just the unknowns of 2020, it gave me the courage to step back and to truly embrace my vocation as a mom. And so not only did I retire is a loose term that I use, but I retired as a nurse. But I also decided to start homeschooling our 2 youngest. So both feet fully in and totally embrace this new journey that the Holy Spirit has guided me into doing.
Awesome. Yeah. And Houston is the one I met?
Yes.
Houston? Okay.
Yep. So he is now a senior at the school that we met at. And I started speaking to high schoolers 13, almost 14 years ago. But I took a hiatus when our oldest, who is now 20, became a student at the school, just for privacy reasons, because it is so in-depth and it is just it's not intrusive, but I am completely transparent and I am comfortable doing that. I don't know if my children were at the time. Yeah. So that's why I kind of took a hiatus of sharing our story at their school. And then last year when we met, I felt called by the Holy Spirit to start sharing it again. But of course, I got our son's permission, who's now a senior.
Yeah. So the story that you're gonna share, how long have you been kind of sharing your story?
We started sharing our story almost the day of Adeline's diagnosis, because we had 2 very young sons at the time, and we were highly involved in all the things of little kids, the sports, the volunteer opportunities, everything that you can imagine. And I didn't want our struggles or the diagnosis to define every part of our lives. And that is why I started the blog. So our family and friends could see where we were in our journey, but it also not hijack every moment of our lives, because it was a struggle. It absolutely was a cross that the Lord chose us to bear.
Yeah. So shall we dive in
to
the story?
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm just going to give you honestly free range to begin however you'd like.
Okay. So 2020 for the entire world, our lives as we knew it changed radically. And it's going to have very long-term effects still of the unknown because of things that occurred. And it is a blessing and a curse in so many different ways. It was a challenge as a Catholic woman raising Catholic children to stand firm and to exercise our free will as it's outlined within the Bible and within the catechesis even. We cannot fully consent to something that is unknown And so that's kind of what started my radical reconversion. And so, due to the events of 2020, I actually sought help for complex childhood trauma that I was a survivor. I was fine forever. I was always fine. I was fine. I wasn't a victim. I was a survivor. And due to the events that unfolded in 2020, I realized that I wasn't fine. And I had done everything up to that point to get by. And the one thing that held me back was my faith, because that area of medicine doesn't always honor our faith and our identity in children of Christ. And so I was a little bit hesitant to get help, but it came to a point in 2020 that there was no choice. And so we found one of the best programs in the world, and they honored our faith, and that was not something that they would ever challenge. And so I went and sought help that I so much needed. And in doing so, I had a radical reconversion. And it once again cemented my faith and made me fall head over heels in love, not only with myself, the way that Jesus teaches us to love ourselves, but the way that even as flawed as I am as a human being, I'm still loved. And Jesus carries those crosses and made the blood covenant not just for the perfect, but the sinful and the broken and the fallen. And it was in that and growing myself back up in the love of Jesus and knowing without a shadow of a doubt who I was and who I belonged to, that I was able to make really big and hard decisions. I thought for the longest time that Adeline, who we'll talk about in just a second, was a consequence of some of the sins in my past. I thought she was punishment from our Heavenly Father. How silly is that? But I truly thought that I needed to know what that felt like in order to be truly forgiven for some of the sins of my past. And you and I both know that that's not how our loving God works at all. And he also chooses certain people to suffer and suffer some more in order to bring us back to him, or in order to bring us back to him and bring friends along with us. And it is in the uttermost suffering in my life that I've been the closest to Christ, because it's within my suffering that I ask him to shelter me within his wounds. And regardless of where we come from here on earth, and regardless of the job that our earthly parents may or may not have done, our identity, so long as it remains and maintains in a child, son, and daughter of God, nothing else matters. And I always knew that somehow, but I never could verbalize it. And it's taken years, 30, almost 40 years now, to be able to come full circle in why my birthday is the anniversary of Roe v. Wade, January 22nd, and why it is that I've had this profound desire to protect life from childhood. Mm-hmm. And so as a teen mom, I was not married. Again, every statistical box that you can imagine that one with a past like mine, I ticked every single box. And becoming a teen mom was the last statistical box I decided I would ever tick. And I made a promise to my child, who's now 20, that he was the last box. And my husband and I, we were boyfriend and girlfriend at the time. We've since now been married a very long time and have welcomed 5 children. And so when I found out that we were pregnant with Harrison, I was a freshman in college. And my husband at the time had a scholarship to the University of Tennessee in Knoxville, So we decided, since he had a scholarship and I did not, I would put my education on hold and he would finish up, and then I would eventually go back to school. And again, God hand weaves everything that we go through. And so Ryan finished up on time with honors at the University of Knoxville, where he went to school. And I put my education on hold. And I cannot explain to you, other than the fact it is a visceral reaction, when you look at your child for the first time. You can feel your heart. I could literally feel my heart growing and getting bigger when I was nursing this newborn child who completely depended on me for all of his things. And that was the moment I knew God put me here on this earth to be a mom. And I read every single book that one can get their hands on in order to how a child develops from 0 to 12 months and how to take care of a baby and what's normal and what's abnormal. And I was not going to fail this child. And I fell in love with him. I fell in love with my husband. I fell in love with just being a mom. And I was called in that vocation from the time I was very young. And so Ryan graduated, like I said, on time. And then we had since gotten married, and we were expecting our second child, a little boy. And when Houston was very young, less than 2 months old, he started running a fever. And the reason that was so significant at that time, because when a newborn or an infant starts running a fever at a certain age, it can cause lifelong devastating effects for that infant. And so our pediatrician, who was Catholic, at the time, he's since passed, God rest his soul, sent us to Vanderbilt. And they thought Houston had meningitis. And so we started IVs, but they were on his little head because he was so dehydrated. They couldn't put him anywhere else. I mean, it was definitely a sanctifying time. And he ended up, everything was fine. He was perfect. It was just a virus that caused a fever. They don't know why. And then life was going great. I had been accepted into a nursing program, which was the whole reason I wanted to go to college initially. But it was into the Dominican campus at Aquinas. Okay. And so I was taught how to be a nurse from a Dominican standpoint. And so our ethics were taught by none other than St. Thomas Aquinas. And it was just forming, once again, my Catholic identity. And so Houston was about 4 months old. And we had a fire in our apartment, but because it was temporary, we weren't going to stay there long. We were just looking for something to buy. We didn't have renter's insurance. And the fire started at like 9 o'clock at night. And we lost everything. Like, I remember you guys telling me that. Yeah, I didn't even have shoes on my feet because it was at nighttime. And so, but you know what? It was just stuff. It truly was just, I mean, things are just things. And it taught us a very good lesson at a very young age what poverty looks like in action. It's not to be attached to earthly possessions. And the people who came forward and helped our young family at the time, they needed to give as much as we needed to receive. So some of the stories that these people brought to us and brought to our family, they needed us just as much as we needed them. And so we were recovering from a devastating fire, and life was going really well. I fell in love with nursing. I fell in love with our Catholic faith. And it was an incredible, incredible opportunity to be able to learn how to be a nurse through Aquinas College and the Dominican Sisters here in Nashville. And it was maybe 3 weeks before I was going to graduate where we learned that we were expecting our third child. And Ryan has a brother. I think he has 5 uncles and only 2 aunts. And I have 3 brothers. So I am surrounded by boys. And then having Harrison in Houston, I didn't care if it was a boy or a girl. I just wanted the child to be healthy. But internally, I would never have voiced it. I really wanted a little girl. And so we had just finished a soccer game And I mean, this is a long time ago. So technology and the advancement in medicine has like night and day.
How old were you when you were pregnant with
I think
your
it was
third?
24 or 25. I was
Okay.
young. I was still very young.
Okay.
But we had found this ultrasound place in Franklin that you could get scanned before 20 weeks to find out if you're having a boy or girl. So we had just finished, I'm sure they won because they were just really cute little athletes, a soccer game. And we were in between a soccer game and birthday parties, just all the things that you do as a young mom with young kids. And so we went to this ultrasound place to find out if we were having a boy or a girl. And I will never forget, I'm laying on the table. Harrison and Houston are really young, like 3 and 5 at the time. So, I mean, they are just being children. And so, but I'll never forget the lady who owned the place. She was scanning me and she looks up and she's like, boys, get your mama tissue because it's a girl. I truly never thought that we would have a girl. And I just remember floating the rest of the day. So we then had to go, this was when we were still shopping at Target. Again, it's almost 14 years ago, but we had to get a present for the little birthday party that we were going to. And I just floated the whole time. I kept like wandering into the Barbie aisles and the pink aisles and all the things that were everything girly. I just truly embraced the fact that God had gifted us with a little girl. And even though we knew that we were having a girl, 20 weeks gestation is a very important time in the development of a child within the womb, because at 20 weeks, everything should look a certain way. Yes, you find out if you're having a boy or a girl, but the real reason they start looking at the anatomy scan at 20 weeks is because kidneys, heart, lungs, brain should look a certain way. And so we went in for our 20-week anomaly screening. There's different names for it. And we were, in fact, having a little girl. But the scan took a lot longer than I thought it would. And I was just thinking, maybe this ultrasonographer is very thorough. Maybe, I just kept making excuses in my mind because I had no clue what was in store for us. But I had just graduated nursing school. I'd just passed my state boards. And I remember sitting on the table and breathing deeply. And that's just a really bad habit I have. And it has nothing, I'm not annoyed with anyone. It has nothing to do with that. It's just a really bad habit I have. And so I remember doing that on her table, and she looked at me with concern. She was like, "Are you okay?" Well, yeah, I'm fine. I just can't breathe. And so she kept scanning, and she kept apologizing profusely because it took a very long time. And she kept apologizing and would say, "I'm sorry, it's just Adeline's moving around a lot." Well, at that time, after it was our third, I could feel her moving. She wasn't really moving around a whole lot. And I think now, looking back, as a nurse, she thought I saw what she was seeing, which were a lot of abnormalities. And the scan was over, and we needed to meet with a doctor to go over it. My OB at the time, who was Catholic, it's all woven by God, ended up being in a surgery. So we had to wait to speak to a different doctor about the results. And so we just kept waiting and waiting. And at this point, Harrison, our oldest, needed to be picked up from kindergarten because he was at a local parochial school that got out at 3:00. And someone in the office overheard me say, "Hey, Ryan, can you go get Harrison from school? And then y'all just come back here and then we'll meet with the doctor." And one of the office staff looked at me and said, "Can anyone else get your son? You do not want to be alone." And those are words that no one ever wants to hear, especially a pregnant mother. And I knew what we were about to receive was going to be scary, but I didn't know how scary. And so we ultimately met with a very kind but very direct doctor who said, "The scan's not normal. Her kidneys have bright spots on them. Her aorta, which is a part of your heart, is narrowed. It looks like a part of her brain is missing, among other things. You need to go to a specialist and they're going to scan you. And so I'm thinking like tomorrow, later in the week, no, we had to leave our first doctor and go to a specialist immediately. Thank God we live in Nashville because everyone is so close when it comes to treatment and medicine. And I remember driving to the specialist office and I looked at Ryan and I said, I can handle having a child who's not perfect. Maybe that's why God let it all work out that I became a nurse, was to take care of a special needs child. So I can handle having a kid with Down syndrome, but I could never handle losing a child. And it was so wild because my prayers silently, interiorly had grown so much from God, please let my child not have Down syndrome, to me praying to God, please just let it be Down syndrome. And we went to the specialist's office and they confirmed more abnormalities, things that should have been there that were not. And ultimately, we opted to have an amniocentesis. And so what that is there's fluid around the baby, but it also carries all of the baby's DNA and chromosomes. And so when you get an amniocentesis, a needle is put in your abdomen and they take a little bit of that fluid out that surrounds the baby and they can send that off for all these different testings. Again, technology has come a very long way and you can do those same tests with a mother's blood. But I even remember just having an amniocentesis. We needed a timeout. I needed to call my priest because what if something happens to the baby? Because there are risks involved. And every single point in our journey, every step that we took, I invoked the Holy Spirit and sought those far wiser than I am. And I will never forget. So we were at a desk and I can't think of her name right now, but she was a specialist in maternal fetal medicine and genealogy. And so she was sitting across from us and it was me and Ryan on this side. And so she's going through like all of the things that it could or could not be. And then she said, I highly doubt that it's going to be trisomy 13 or 18. And then she named a couple of others because you're so young, because you have two healthy boys. And she said, but if it is trisomy 13 or 18, they are incompatible with life. So you need to think about that. And, I just left in ignorance. I was scared, but not terrified because of our faith. And I had just passed state boards. And I rocked them without drinking caffeine because you're not supposed to drink caffeine when you're pregnant. And it was exciting. So I'm outside burning my years of nursing notes. And I get a phone call on a Thursday afternoon. And it's the doctor. And I'm sitting on the floor. My laptop is on my lap. And she said, the results are in. And it is trisomy 13, which is completely incompatible with life. And I just lost it. I finally allowed myself to emotionally break down for the first time since week 20. And I asked God why. And I made sounds that were not human. I was like a wild animal, wounded. After all the struggles that I overcame and that I went through as a child and as a young mom and as a teenager, like, why do you keep picking on me? And now I know, looking back almost 14 years later, God handpicks certain people to struggle and struggle and struggle and struggle some more. And it's at those opportunities and those points in time that we can either go to anger and hatred and resent, or we can follow the light in the darkness and bring others into that light and be a beacon of hope and love for our children and family members. And so we knew that it was trisomy 13. We knew that she, again, this is 14 years ago, things have changed, but back then the life expectancy was only 2.5 days.
After
Yes.
birth?
So they said, if she even makes it to term, because most babies with trisomy 13 don't make it. They spontaneously abort. That's also a miscarriage. It's the same. It's synonymous. It means the same thing. Before they get to term, because their bodies are so profoundly different. Yeah. And it's not just 1 or 2 cells that are affected. Every single cell in their body has a mutation on the 13th chromosome.
Okay. So that's trisomy 13.
It is.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. And we kept seeking additional specialists because we live in Nashville and, we had great insurance at the time, but not for an alternative diagnosis there's also different levels of trisomy.
Okay.
But had Adeline had a different level, it would have changed what hospital we delivered in. Because if she had something wrong with her heart that could be surgically corrected, we would have delivered at the Children's Hospital. Because then they would take her, be able to take her into the NICU there and monitor her until she was ready for her surgery. If it was what she did indeed have, we would have delivered where we delivered. Mm-hmm. But I'll never forget going into specialist after specialist's office, and I would tell them before anyone even touched me, please put on my chart on the top that I am Catholic. We will not choose termination. We will not choose abortion. Please do not ask me. This is hard enough as it is.
Yeah.
I'm not going to choose that. So please don't ask me that. So we're at Vanderbilt. And we went to the best of the best because this was our child and we were able to do that. And this was literally the best in the world. This OB that we had gone to teaches all over the world. I can't remember now, but at the time, whatever his specialty was.
Yeah.
But he was very pompous, very arrogant. Atheist, agnostic, if not atheist, maybe a godlike complex. But again, a lot of doctors have that. No judgment. But I'll never forget, he thought I was so stupid and so dumb and just looked down on me like an idiot because I wasn't choosing to interrupt our pregnancy, which they liked to use really fluffy, fun words other than calling it what it is. They got very frustrated with me because I wasn't going to kill our child.
So I've never heard that where they don't typically call it abortion.
No, not at all. No.
They call it an interruption.
An interruption. So if you and I are in a conversation and I interrupt you, you will get the chance to come back and finish your thought or finish your sentence. That's what interruption is. That's interesting. Interrupt, right? When you interrupt a heartbeat, when you stop and terminate a heartbeat, there's no coming back and restarting that. And he truly thought I was a moron. And I was so young at the time. And he said to me, well, what are you going to do if you're at the grocery store in the checkout line and someone asks you about your baby? Well, what do you mean? What do you mean? And he was like, well, when someone asks you if you're having a boy or a girl, how are you going to answer that? And I just remember thinking, oh my goodness, he's done this before. He has convinced moms before me who are not as strong in their faith or as strong in their conviction in the love of life, like truly embracing the love of life, to trick them and to get into their heads to convince them otherwise. And I looked at him and I was like, you know what? If someone ever asks me about my child, I'm going to be so excited to let them know, here's my due date. It's a girl. Her name's Adeline. And that's it. I'm not going to share any perverse story with them. Why would I bring another person down when they're excited about the life that they see within me? And I just wondered, had that questionable scenario been a quicker means to an end for the moms before me? More than likely, yes.
Yeah.
And my husband remembers this so profoundly. I remember it, but it didn't touch my heart the way that it had touched Ryan's heart. but we were leaving and we were just defeated. I mean, I just went toe to toe with this physician who was very arrogant, and I'm not. I do not like conflict. I run from it. And it was a lot. And again, like, as a mom, even if your child's in your womb, you're still going to protect that child. I felt like she was being bullied.
Yeah.
By a
that's your
grown
child.
man. Yeah.
Yeah. Wow.
So we're leaving, we're getting on the elevators, and on the 6th floor at the hospital we were in, now as a nurse, I know who and what are in those clinics. And one of the clinics is the cerebral palsy clinic, which is a diagnosis that children are given, and it can be from it's brain damage, but then there's also a lot of other things and a lot of other specialists that the child with cerebral palsy needs to see. And there's a special clinic there, which is amazing. But they have all the specialists there, the whole team for cerebral palsy on this floor at the hospital. And so this little girl was running out from this suite as we were all waiting to get on the elevator, and she just throws herself at Ryan. Just throws herself, bear hug. And Ryan just throws his arms around her. And the mom was mortified. And she just keeps apologizing. Ryan's like, no, it's okay. And he's got like tears running down his face. And he's like, no, it's fine. It's totally fine. It's fine. God knew Ryan needed that moment to embrace this child who was less than perfect in the world's eyes.
Yeah.
And God sent that sweet little innocent child to my husband in that moment. And it was like balm and soothing balm for his soul. And he talks about this little girl all the time.
Yeah. And
I think that when we are sometimes initially dealt a hand we don't know how to play, God will send us God winks. Mm-hmm. And in that moment, that little girl was 1,000% a God wink. Mm-hmm. And so I remember we were firm in our stance with Adeline. We refused to terminate, interrupt, abort her. One of the hardest things, even now looking back almost 14 years later, and again, it is my life's goal and duty to love like Jesus loves and to forgive like Jesus forgives. As a broken person, it's not always easy, and I have to seek forgiveness. And just like I have to seek forgiveness, I also have to really work on forgiving others. I'll never forget, my husband and I were sitting in the doctor's office, and I knew this woman no, that's not true. I later on worked with this woman on a professional level. At this time, I was her patient, but I ended up eventually down the line working with her on a professional level.
And where are we in your pregnancy? How many weeks?
This all happened. So anywhere from like 24 to 20. Anywhere from 20 to like 24 weeks. So, okay, this is all like within a month. I mean, it was just bam, 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 bam. And you have to remember too, we had a little 3-year-old. No, he was 2. I'm sorry. I get this confused because Houston was 3 when he was born, or when Adeline was born, and Harrison was 5 when she was born. We had a 2 and a 4-year-old too. And so, it was a lot of juggling. Ryan was very blessed right out of college and got an incredible job here in Nashville. So we were able to move back home after college. Yeah. So we did have family here. And
so you met with?
So we met again with this specialist. She was a geneticist. And again, I met with just like, you idiot. Don't you get it? Think about her. Think about what's best for her. Think about yourself. Because they knew that we were not going to budge on sustaining her life and embracing her life. And I'll never forget it. We had our family members, I'm not going to name names, but it forever changed the way that I look at certain family members. But we had one family member who had a home here in town in Atlanta and would commute because the job was in Atlanta, and then they would come home on the weekends to be with family. They had already set up a hospital floor, VIP, all of the things, so I could go to Atlanta, VIP experience for the abortion. No one would ever know because I was too far at that point to terminate the pregnancy here in town. But VIP, right? I mean, that was like their selling point. We've already contacted the hospital. You'll have the whole floor. It's the VIP, da 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 da. And I'm just like, are you kidding me? These people are some of the people who were so influential into developing the child self into the adult self that I became. And you also have to remember that Ryan and I met when we were 12. So we've known each other essentially our whole lives. He's known my family. I've known his family for a very, very, very long time. And then I was just being like chirping was just all around me. And I'll never forget, I put my head in my hands and I just started not crying, but just like distress and just kind of aggressively, which is not my personality at all. It was like, I don't want to go to hell for this. I'm not doing it. Like, leave me alone. I'm not going to choose abortion. And another family member said, you're not going to go hell over this, kind of mocking me a little bit.
Did you, I haven't asked you this, but did you feel like in that, while this was all happening, that there was more people against you? Like,
yes.
Why are you doing this versus,
oh yeah,
we're here, Erika, for you. We're going to walk with you.
Yeah, no. And again, the world crucified Christ long before they crucified me. Okay. And so, of course, the world didn't agree with what I was doing. Of course, my grandmother thought I was so stupid. Just have an abortion. Get it. Why would you do this? It's so dumb. My aunt, my cousin. I mean, it was just like, thought I was so dumb to carry on with Adeline instead of just making a finite decision. It wasn't my decision to make. Mm-hmm. God created this life. It is not up to me to end it. Period. Mm-hmm. I now know after years of growth and treatment and therapy from childhood wounds, there were reasons that I needed to be on the same field as others in my family. And we went blindly into the rest of our pregnancy. Now, there is something that you can develop when you have a child with abnormal chromosomes, and it's mirror syndrome. It's a phenomenon. It's not, again, this is 14 years ago. Is it scientific now? I don't know. I'm not up on all the research. But then it was a phenomenon that would occur called mirror syndrome. And essentially, because the baby's chromosomes were sick, it would make your placenta sick. And I ended up getting very, very sick. And I developed preeclampsia, which is very high blood pressure before a seizure. Eclamptic is seizuring, preeclampsia is before a seizure, and it was caused by high blood pressure. And I just managed it with bed rest, read a lot of books I'd always wanted to read that I never got to. My husband was absolutely incredible and became Mr. Mom and did all of the things that a mom and a dad do. And I just bed rested, rested in bed. So fast forward, it was December 31st, and we are at my father-in-law's house, and I've got my feet up on his coffee table because you can do that at his house. It's not too formal. So you could actually put your feet on the coffee table and it's fine. But I started mashing on my shins, and I had significant edema, which is fluid overload in your extremities from something. But being a nurse, I knew that my blood pressure was probably through the roof with this pitting edema is what they call it. So pitting edema is when you mash on your skin and it just hangs out mashed for a very long time.
Yeah.
And so that was December 31st. Harrison and Houston went back to school after the Christmas break, December 4th. And it was a very busy morning when we woke up that morning, and I felt awful, just awful. And I got them up, helped Ryan get them out the door to school, and there were just mounds of laundry, housework, all the things that needed to get done. But I remember I just felt so awful. And I was like, I'm just going to set my alarm. When it goes off, I'll get up and I'll tackle everything and it'll be fine. But every time my alarm would go off, I felt worse than the hour before when I had set my alarm. And it was about mid-morning. It was close to noon when I knew that something was profoundly wrong and I was very sick. I woke up and I started having symptomatic responses to the blood pressure. Mm-hmm. And so that looked like a headache, that just the worst migraine you can imagine. And then there were floaters in the air. So have you ever seen stars or, so I was seeing stars in the air. It was glitter and it was beautiful, but I also knew that was really bad. And so I called my doctor and she wanted me to come in so she could see what my blood pressure was and do a few tests. And so I drove to the doctor. And my blood pressure, again, this is almost 14 years ago. I don't remember what the reading was now, but it was through the roof. And then she also did some testing as well to see if it was more than just preeclampsia. And it was. I had developed something called HELP syndrome, and the morbidity and mortality rate is not great. And so what HELP syndrome stands for is hemolysis, so my red blood cells were just breaking down. Elevated liver enzymes, so my liver was shutting down. And then low platelets. So in the event that I did bleed out, I would have no reserve to clot the bleeding. And the only cure for HELP syndrome is delivery of the baby. So even if Adeline was perfectly normal and developmentally perfectly normal, I still would have had to have delivered as early as we did. Mm-hmm. And I went into the hospital January 4th, and I think the fact that my health was so compromised, it helped us forget about how sick Adeline was. We already knew before we were going to go into the hospital to have Adeline that we weren't going to have her heart rate monitored during the labor process, because most babies with trisomy 13 do not make it through the rigorous labor process. So from an emotional standpoint, we didn't want to know that we had come this far to only lose our baby in the labor process and then knowingly have to deliver a dead baby. So we did the contraction monitor, we opted out of the heart rate monitor, and they started me on medicine for the HELP syndrome. And we had befriended and just fallen in love with our parish priest at the time. He's now retired, but Father Mike Johnston just became a part of our family, and we became a part of his. And he was so profound in this journey with us. I didn't know at that time what a profound impact Adeline had made on his life as well. But the plan was, Father is going to come to the hospital, and the moment that Adeline is born, he's going to baptize her.
Yeah.
I am extremely modest, and I never thought that he would think that meant he would be beside me in the hospital room, by the bed, being a part of the whole delivery. I just never thought that needed to be explained. It did. So he has all this time while he's there preparing, terrified that he's going to be in there, in the delivery. So I think that was it was good. It's silly now, and I can laugh about it now, but he had that distraction thinking he was going to watch me birth a baby as a priest, needing to baptize the baby. Again, that was never the plan. So Father waited outside in the hallway. Adeline was born, and we knew she was going to be born blue because of the heart defects that she had. She had coarctation of the aorta, and she had an atrial, a hole in between her atrium and ventricles. So her heart was just completely messed up. So we knew that when she was born, she was going to be blue. Mm-hmm. And she was. She wasn't crying a whole lot. And it was tough. It was really tough. And her first APGAR score, I used to know this perfectly. It was either a 2 or a 3. And so what the APGAR score is the score that's given to all newborn babies. And essentially, it just measures how well is this new child going to transition from in utero into the world. And so the APGAR scores are anything from 0, that's a baby who has passed away, to 10. Mm-hmm. I used to be a high-risk OB nurse, and 10, I've never seen one. You never see 10s. 8s are really great. 9s are rare. 7s are good too. And I think Adeline's was a 2 or a 3. I cannot remember. But we knew that she more than likely would not be with us for very long. And so we dried her off, and somebody rushed her to Father Mike outside, and he blessed her. And then she was brought back in, and I was covered. And then once appropriate, I was covered up and whatnot. And then Father Mike came in. But without any medical intervention whatsoever, her APGAR score went from a 2 or a 3 to a 7. So, I mean, she went from purple, oh no, this doesn't look good, to a healthy, newborn, robust baby.
Wow.
And I had cerebral swelling, so a little bit of brain swelling. So some of my events of the night, or yes, it was the night of the night, are a little blurry. I remember some of my nursing instructors who I had at Aquinas were Dominican sisters, and they surrounded me. Oh, wow. Harrison and Houston's principal at the time was a Dominican sister. She was there visiting. Okay. And Father Mike was there visiting. And then Adeline's pediatrician at the time, he was my pediatrician growing up. And we had such a great relationship with him that my dad always called him Bill. So I always called him Bill. Mm-hmm. And so Bill was Adeline's pediatrician, and he was a devout Catholic as well. And we just lived and relished in this child and this gift from God. And she brought all these people together from all over the country. My brother lived in Arizona. I had one brother in DC. They all flew in, and they were laying and slept anywhere they could, which is so gross. They don't know what they don't know, and that's fine. Yeah. But the hospitals are so gross. You don't just lay anywhere. But no one left my side. I was in the ICU for 2 or 3 days. And Adeline was just hanging out. So she wasn't supposed to leave the hospital. She was only supposed to live 2.5 days if she made it through the labor process. So, I mean, like each thing that she wasn't supposed to do, she was doing it and just bringing people with her.
Yeah. So they said something like, if she makes it through the labor process, that may not happen.
Right.
If she does, 2-3 days is what we're seeing.
So much so, we didn't buy a car seat. We had planned her funeral when I was pregnant with her, which was so bizarre, planning someone's funeral. You could very much feel alive inside of you. I was picking out caskets, what plot she was going to be buried in. All these things while I sustained her life. Bizarre.
Yeah, if you don't mind me asking, what emotionally, what was that like?
I kept it together for those around me, for my children, and for those who are not as, I'm not going to say strong as I am, but like I knew I had to exemplify strength that was not human. I mean, this was divine. This person I became in this utmost struggle didn't come from me. I mean, it truly was a gift from God. Yeah. I was able to see things. I was not clouded by emotions. I wasn't clouded by grief. I was able to do things and get them done because they needed to be done. Ryan he did a lot, but he could not plan the funeral. He couldn't have anything to do with it. the only thing that he asked was that no one wear black at the funeral.
Mm.
And so I did it because it needed to get done. And it was, we'll get to that in a second.
Yeah.
And, it was hard. And I'll never forget, we bought a big black Suburban because our family was growing.
Mm-hmm.
We bought it for Adeline. And I was leaving the funeral home after I had just planned Adeline's funeral, and I accidentally hit someone in the parking lot behind me. And never planned on getting it fixed. As silly as that is, years later, I didn't want to get it fixed because that was a moment in time that she was still with us. And Ryan and I drive our cars into the ground. I mean, we drive them until they're not drivable anymore. And so we held on to that Suburban for a very, very, very long time. And I'm a great driver. I'm just not good in parking lots. And so every car that I drive, it gets to the point that it looks like it's been in a fight, but it lost it like on all four corners. Again, on the road, I'm great. It's just parking lots are not so great. But it got to the point that it had been completely beaten up and it needed to be fixed. And so Ryan just took the car in and got all of the corners fixed, including where I had backed into someone. And I was so distraught when it came back, and it was, that dent was gone. Mm-hmm. And it's a dent, and it's silly, and it's a car. But for whatever reason at that time, it was really important to me. So I planned her funeral. And because she was not supposed to leave the hospital alive, we did not have a car seat. We bought 2 outfits, one for her to get her pictures made in, which we had hired a photographer at that time. And there's a program, again, this is 14 years ago. I don't know if they're still around, but Now I Lay Me Down to Sleep. And so there's photographers all over the country, and they'll come to the hospital and take pictures of your baby, even if they're demised, passed away. And so we bought an outfit for her to get photographed in, and then one for her to get buried in. And that was it. So I had gotten better. My numbers were better. My platelets were fine. Everything was fine. And Adeline and I both got discharged on a Friday afternoon. And so my mom and my mother-in-law went on a shopping spree. They bought a car seat. They bought, because it was winter and snowing. Yeah. And so she didn't have clothes to wear in the snow. And so they went and they bought her this, snow onesie and a car seat and all the things. And we got discharged, both of us, on a Friday that it wasn't supposed to happen. Mm-hmm. And Ryan and I drove home, and even the snow that blanketed Nashville at the time was a gift from God, because there's such a visual that I can close my eyes and I can see exactly what it looked like when we got to take her home. Mm-hmm. And my family had left earlier in the day that we were discharged to go and get our place in tip-top shape for Adeline. And my oldest brother is a humongous guy. And, he's always been big, but, he's tall, and he's, a former football player, and he's just a big guy. And so Ryan and I and Adeline were driving up, and we can see him outside. Snow is surrounding him. He lives in Arizona, so I think he's even in shorts and like a t-shirt, but he's like twinkle toes. He is so excited, like just jumping up and down like a kid to see us coming home with Adeline. It was a great moment. And so we got to bring Adeline home on that Friday, and there were bodies everywhere. We lived in a teeny tiny condo at the time, and there were adult bodies everywhere. Everyone was sleeping anywhere that they could. We had neighbors come over that just didn't want to leave, and that was fine. It was an incredibly joyful occasion, and such a miracle that we didn't think that we were ever going to be able to have to bring Adeline home. Mm-hmm. And so that was on Friday. My sister-in-law was there with my oldest brother. Her name's Anna. And she's just such a treasure. If you can pick your sister-in-law, like, I would totally choose her. But she's just a loving, kind woman. And so food and prepping the food. And I mean, she made sure that we were fed. And she's always been such a loving, strong presence. And that day was no different.
How were, if you don't mind me asking, so you said during pregnancy, some of your family was not supportive. Did they begin to be more supportive, specifically at birth?
I don't know how to put this because it's going to be an oxymoron. They were supportive, but they were also supportive in abortion, right? It doesn't make sense, does it? I don't know. I don't know. Again, some things are not my story to share. But in my healing journey that started in 2020, I can recognize why some people, some family members encouraged it. So they were supportive in the sense that, isn't that odd? I mean, I don't even know how to explain it. Like, yes, they were supportive, but they also pushed abortion. So I don't know how to answer it.
Yeah, that is interesting.
Right?
Yeah.
And so Saturday morning we woke up, there was still snow covering the ground, and it was just absolutely beautiful. We had hospice. Monarch Hospice is the child version of a live hospice, who I just love so much. And they had just started at that time a perinatal hospice. Again, this is 14 years ago. But so we had a hospice team while I was still pregnant with Adeline. And so there was counseling and a chaplain and a hospice nurse. And so we got to know this team while we were still pregnant with Adeline, which was really great. Saturday morning when we woke up, Harrison was on a little basketball team, and he did not want to leave to his basketball game at all. And I didn't want him to either, right? But I don't want to. So he's going to go and he's going to win and he's going to score baskets for Adeline. And so he's kissing her and he's prolonging the goodbye. And I tried to shelter them from all of the grief and all of the trauma that comes with losing a sibling. I sought professionals. I sought I sought their pediatrician. I sought child development specialist, grief counselors. I mean, I wanted to do this in a way that would have the least amount of impact on them from me and from Ryan and from our experience. I didn't want it to bleed into theirs. And so again, the strength that overcame me during this time was not from me. I turned into this person that for the first time in my life, I'm not going to say proud because pride's not great, but I wasn't ashamed of the person that I was. And again, it didn't come from me. It was a gift. And so as a nurse, when we woke up on Saturday morning, I knew that Adeline was dying. She stopped eating. She stopped making wet diapers. And Saturday was such a long day. And she is and was, in every sense of the word, a fighter. Harrison went off to his basketball game. Unfortunately, they did not win. Who cares, right? And so he came back, and there's a lot of moments in my life where I have sacrificed my well-being, my emotional well-being, my mental well-being, my physical well-being for others. I've never regretted it. Mm-hmm. And never is a strong word. In this instance, I didn't regret it at all. I got to hold Adeline for 9 months and really get to know who she was as a person. She loved the movies, loved them. She hated it if I sat with my knees tucked up. And she really had such a great sense of humor, even in my belly. So because trisomy 13, it was very rare at the time. I'm sure it's still rare. But the children who have trisomy 13, just like with trisomy 21, have similar characteristics. And they really wanted to see what her face looked like. She didn't want them to. And so I don't know how many ultrasounds we had, but they really wanted to get a good look at her face. And so, but she would cover it. And so they would go to scan her face and she would cover it. And then they'd be like, well, we'll just scan something else and then we'll go back. So then they would go to scan something else in her belly or in my belly, but on her body. And she would put her hands down. And so they'd go back up to her face and she'd immediately cover it again. I mean, it was like she had a great sense of humor. But because I had all this time to really get to know my child, I didn't hold her as much as I wanted to. Once she was here, I felt the need to share with those around me who didn't get that chance. And it's one of the most selfless things I've ever done. I shared her. I let others hold her when she was dying. I let others hold her when it's your maternal instinct to want to grab your child like a bear and growl at anyone who comes near. But I didn't. I refrained. But Saturday was a really long day. Again, Adeline wanted to be here just as much as she wanted to be here. And the hospice nurse came to call time of death. And the first time she comes to call time of death and she listens to Adeline's heartbeat and her heart starts beating again. So she's like, oh, and she wasn't close. I mean, this woman's like an hour away wherever she came from. I mean, she was like an hour away. And then she tells me, she goes, I know that you're a nurse, but today you need to be mom. Don't be a nurse today. Let someone else take that role. Again, that was such a God moment because I, as a nurse and as a mom and someone who has no control over this situation but can control nursing aspects, I needed to hear that. And I will forever be grateful for her for telling me, be mom today. And so she comes 3 different times, this hospice nurse, to call time of death. And Adeline's heartbeat, and she would start breathing every time. I mean, it was just like, okay, Adeline, please stop doing this to this poor woman. I mean, she's driving an hour to come and do time of death and like, you know.
Wow.
But I mean, she was a fighter, a trickster, all of the things. But one of the most profound moments that I will always be so grateful that God gave us was, I know that there's worse things than death. I know death of the soul is far greater than death of the body. I know that sometimes our human body is so flawed that death is a blessing. Watching your child struggle to breathe, watching your child through the dying process, death is a gift. And it's not an end, but it's a beginning of your eternity. And it takes all of us. Sometimes some of us get to different levels of the castle, like St. Therese teaches us. And I was ready to let Adeline go. I was ready to watch her stop struggling. And I also know that sometimes people who are dying need to hear permission that it's okay to die, because the only reason they are holding on is for those here who are left behind. And we had a priest in our room. We had family members, neighbors, the hospice nurse. I mean, we were surrounded the entire day by all different people. And Ryan was struggling so much. And as a wife, I'm helpless. I was helpless to help him. And he needed to tell Adeline goodbye. He needed to tell her it was okay to go home. And Ryan said to Adeline, before you go, I need your dad. I need you to give your dad a kiss. And you have to understand the dying process is such a laborious process. I mean, the human, just, physiologically, we want to survive. We want to stay alive. It's in every cell in our body seeking oxygen, seeking life. And so the human body, physiologically, we fight it from our very core. usually. And Adeline's dying. She's premature. Her brain is not normal. She has parts of her brain that are missing. I mean, so she's profoundly developmentally delayed. And so this little girl who has all of these obstacles in front of her, she gets up on all fours, I kid you not, and places her lips to Ryan's not once but twice. That is the closest to heaven I will ever see on this earth. That is the gift that my husband needed in order to say goodbye and surrender to the will of our Father, which was letting go of a child.
Yeah.
And Father Mike was in the room when this happened. And of course, it's going to have a profound impact on us and on our family and as the mother and the father, you know. But this had an impact, such a profound impact on Father Mike. It changed him. And he started talking about us in retreats he would go on. Of course, we were anonymous, but he would go on and he would talk about us in retreats. So to see as an outsider looking in, wow, our child who was written off so long ago has such a profound impact on a man who promised God he was going to serve him in love, obedience, and all the things that it means to be a man of holy orders. She had such a profound impact on him. I knew she was a gift through and through.
So how old was she?
She lived for 5 days.
And she got on all fours and gave Ryan 2 kisses.
Yeah. And then she would, I mean, I can't tell you, I mean, her heart would stop beating and we would call the nurse to call a time of death and then she would be fine again. I mean, she did, it was a long day. Yeah. And she wanted to be here just as much as we wanted her here.
Yeah.
And she saved our marriage because we were selfish and self-centered. Was it age? Yes. Would it have changed without Adeline? Absolutely not. She made me a better mom. She made me a better wife, a better person. And to know that there are worse things than death, and death can be such a beautiful, wonderful experience if you're given the opportunity to have a happy, holy death. And Adeline showed me what it looks like to have a happy, holy death. And I thought that the reason that her death was so beautiful and so powerful was because she was just a little bitty infant. And that's not true. I have since started volunteering, not so much now that school is in, but over the summer I would volunteer a lot at a local hospice house. And the whole reason for the hospice house is to provide a happy, holy death for the poor and the homeless. I have seen the gift of God and the gift of grace and love and merciful love poured out onto adults who lived sinful, horrible lives. At their time of death, they were seeking resolution and they were seeking redemption from our Heavenly Father. And I have seen that exact same happy, holy death that I saw with Adeline into other children of God.
Yeah.
So it doesn't matter where we've come from. It matters what we've done and where we're going and our intentions.
Yeah. It's beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. Even just, death can be seen as a gift and a blessing. And that's not the final say. And I remember I told you about Blessed Chiara Corbella.
Yes.
Did you read her book? Or
I haven't, but I bought it.
Okay.
But I haven't read it yet. Yeah.
So I'm not going to share her whole story, but similar to you, where the baby didn't have a skull and everyone was saying abort the baby. She said, no, my baby might not be fit for this life, but is absolutely fit for the next. We're going to accompany my baby to the Father. And gave birth, baptized, and the baby was accompanied to the Father. And that happened with her second baby as well.
Yes.
And then the third baby, she ultimately got cancer from, delivered healthy, but she passed away. And her husband was so mad. And like right before she died, they were in the chapel and he was like, I don't get it. I thought the cross was sweet and the burden was light. Like, I don't get it. Like, is this cross you're going through sweet? And she smiled and said, yes, it's sweet. And she passed away with a sense of joy and peace. And so, yeah, I think that's And I'm sure your family, those that maybe were pushing abortion, that Adeline, there was a blessing and a grace that just even from her birth, her presence,
Yeah.
probably even healing. So, what would you say from yourself? You just said, I changed as a woman, as a mother, as a wife. What do you think, after her passing and moving forward, what do you think was the big change between maybe your family, Ryan, and you, that shifted?
Well, I can speak for Ryan, not for him, but I can, assume. We want to see Adeline again one day. And we changed our lives in order to be able to grace her presence one day. You live like no other when you're only living for yourself. And you live like no other when you're living to glorify God in order to see his face one day and the face of your child. Not every mother gets a saint to pray and intercede for her. And that's a gift. When I miss her, when her birthday comes around, I ask her to pray for me. Not all moms get that.
Yeah.
And I've also been able to help other mothers after me who have gone through similar situations offer what it is that they're willing to hear.
Yeah. I loved what you said. I've never heard it before in this way, but what you said of just her in the womb, I got to get to know her sense of humor. She likes movies. I'm not kidding. I've never heard someone, it's more of we'll see their personality when they grow up, where you're saying it's no. They have their unique personality. They're unique and unrepeatable.
Oh yeah.
She was covering her face, and then even now, okay, there's still a connection with her. She's alive. She's more alive. That's what we believe as Catholic Christians. And I remembered, I forgot who said it, but there was a couple or, a woman who had a miscarriage. And, you hear some people that might say, hey, forget it. You went through a brutal, painful process. Got it. Do your best to just move on, almost forget it. Whereas I heard one person say, no. As Catholic Christians, we believe that baby is fully alive and actually name the baby.
Yeah.
That's your daughter. That's your son. So I think that's just a different way of viewing pregnancy, of viewing life, So
we have gotten to know a Carmelite priest. He's from India and he's become a part of our family. It blows me away oftentimes that we're worthy enough for him to love us as much as he does. But the feeling is absolutely mutual. But I was sitting I went to Mass to celebrate Mama Mary's birthday last week. And so we did the readings and then he's going over the homily. And we've gotten to know him very, very well. But he said something I'd never heard him say before, and it was so profound. And he said, Jesus is the Son of God, right? Yeah. Yes. Jesus is God. Yes, he is. Jesus was God in Mary's womb. And Jesus was the Son of God in Mary's womb as well. It doesn't change just because you're in the womb or you're outside of it, who you are and why you're here.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. We've said the litany of Jesus in the womb, and we've gone and we've prayed where we need to pray to fight for life. And we've done the things that we do that as a former teen mom and then a mom who was fighting, not physically, but verbally, emotionally for another child, we do show up and we do the things. But I've never heard it said like that. And it was so beautiful. And then last month, sadly, a friend of mine who she's one of the keys, I think, in living a holy life where you seek God and seek God to glorify him is surrounding yourself by people who are more holy than you are.
Yeah.
And to continue to seek it. and continue to call upon those who are a lot further in their journeys than you are. But a friend of mine last month, she was lost a child, and she had a funeral service at Calvary, the Catholic cemetery, to honor her son. Mm-hmm. And we went to the funeral, and it was the first time I'd ever gone to a funeral of a child who passed away in the womb. And it hit me like a ton of bricks. It was so beautiful. And it was so perfect and embraced and enveloped everything that it means to be a mom. And she looked like Mary that day. She is celebrating this life and love and bringing others to him to lay him in his final resting place. Even though it began and ended in her womb, he was still celebrated.
Yeah.
And it was so beautiful.
Yeah. So thank you for sharing your story. So I don't know if you have how many lessons you learned from that? Probably a lot. But if you could share, maybe there's a girl out there who is a teen and she's pregnant. Maybe, you've been through being a teen pregnant. You've been through a pregnancy where people were telling you to abort, and you've been through where you were suffering during pregnancy, could have died. Right. I don't know. And then you gave birth, 4 days with a baby. You've been through it. So what would be your message, maybe to mothers, maybe to families that are going through something like this? What's your biggest takeaway or something that you would want to tell them?
So as a mom, we teach our children how to love. We are their first teacher, and it's our duty to show them the love by the way that we treat them and talk to them, and what we sacrifice with love, to do small things with great love, right? Like Mother Teresa teaches us, even if it is picking up a dirty dish from the bedside table that you have asked for 17 years not to leave there. Small things with great love.
Yeah.
I will say there is something profound living a life without regrets. Do I have regrets as a mom? 1,000%. If I could go back and do other things differently, without a shadow of a doubt, I would. But God tells us not to do that. Don't worry about the past. It's happened. Don't worry about the future. It will take care of itself. We need to be present in this moment. And that is all we have, is this moment. And it's in these moments that shape little saints. It's in these moments that we teach children through the love of God what their worth is and where it comes from. And we never know what the next moment holds. These children that we are gifted with raising and blessed to call ours temporarily, tomorrow might not be the same. So living a life without regrets is so vital. And the way that you do it is, God has a plan for all of us. We were written on Jesus's name thousands of years ago in Calvary when he made that blood covenant. He made it not to everyone surrounding him at that time, but he made it to you and to me and the unborn and the yet to even be a part of the unborn.
Yeah.
And when we make a decision that isn't ours to make, the fallout and the collateral damage is unprecedented. When we play God, we have the consequences without being God. Our humanistic brokenness gets in the way sometimes, being able to receive the love of God the way that he intended us to receive it. There are so many places that would love your baby. I have taught my children, boys, don't ever put a girl in a position where she feels like she has to choose between life and death. And in the event that that happens, it's your job now, and it's your duty to be a dad and a husband. You made that choice, and to raise the child the way that they deserve.
Yeah. Yeah. I have a friend from college. She got pregnant in college. And I remember she would tell people, I, I want to give birth to the baby and I'm going to give the baby up for adoption. But she gave birth and she held her baby. And for her, it was,
There's no way.
this is my baby. And it's her baby. And she didn't give it up for adoption. Adoption is obviously amazing.
I am too selfish. I think adoption is one of the most loving things you could ever do for somebody.
Mm-hmm.
I think it is absolutely incredible. And when I talk about pro-love and, pro-life, on this side of it, right? On this side of it, it doesn't come from a place of judgment or condemnation even. When I see women who have fallen for the lies of this world and think that pro-choice means pro-abortion and killing your child, my heart breaks for that woman. Mm-hmm. Because the science has shown the long-term effects mentally, psychologically that these women go through and the anger that they get stuck in that they can't undo. Once you stop someone's heart, you can't go start it back up because you think you made a mistake. Mm-hmm. And so loving these women and praying for these women who don't have the same perspective that I do is key for us all coming together as children of God. And there are so many times that, what about incest? What about rape? What about all that? We don't know. We don't know what we don't know. And that child is never a burden.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I'm going to say it, and I don't know how people are going to feel about it, but I heard Lila Rose. I don't know if you know Lila Rose.
I do.
She said,
I don't know her personally, but yes, I know who she is.
Yeah, and she said this, and it was just like, whoa, I've never heard that argument before. But she said, an innocent child doesn't deserve the death penalty due to a crime that child did not commit.
I agree.
And it was just like, whoa, like, it's spot on, But
even if we think back, sorry, I interrupted you.
You're good.
Right. So if we think about the victim, a child victim, as a survivor myself of childhood abuse and overcoming complex childhood trauma, I didn't deserve what happened to me as a child because of the diabolical adults around me. I didn't deserve it. And even though I didn't deserve it, I still had a very long period in my life where I was surrounded by people who taught me every way not to be Christian. Just like the children in the womb don't deserve the death penalty for a crime they didn't commit. I mean, if we're for life, right, and if we're for birth and pro-love and pro-life outside of the womb, of course we're going to be for it inside of the womb. There's no difference. You can't just, a child doesn't just become a child because they're in one place or the other.
Yeah.
We need to protect children always.
Yeah. 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 And I think, for me, just hearing your story is...
It's just the iceberg, the tip of it.
Yeah. We may have to have you back for more.
Maybe.
Maybe with Ryan. Come on, Ryan. Okay. My big takeaway from this is, life is a gift. All life is beautiful and is a gift, is worth celebrating. And even those who have had an abortion, life is messy. But at times, and we all have our different sin, our different mistakes and faults and brokenness, but we need to have, with God's grace, the courage to bring that into the light. Any mistakes we've made is not outside of the mercy of God. 100%. And it can be redeemed. Every single thing, every drop, all creation is meant to be redeemed. We just have to open ourselves to it.
And ask for it.
That's right.
And seek it. Yeah. Well, I will say, because of where and for how long I have been just a lover of life, I involved myself in a lot of pro-life things.
Mm-hmm.
And I met this woman a couple of years ago at some event that I was at, something on the hill, right?
Mm-hmm.
It was something on the hill. And she gets up, and this woman is beautiful, older lady, but just stunning through and through.
Mm-hmm.
She gets up and shares her abortion story and the redemption and all of the things. And immediately I fell in love with this woman
Mm-hmm.
and the grace and the strength that it takes. I just wanted to be her friend,
Yeah.
you know, like, hey, can we go get lunch? Or I just thought what strength and just profound grace
Mm-hmm.
that she used to redeem her suffering. I mean, that's
Mm-hmm.
redemptive suffering. I mean, she humiliates herself, gets up, true humility, and it's like, hey, it's a pro-life event. Hey,
Yeah.
I'm pro-life because I had an abortion. Let me share with you what not to do.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, and I think the other members who were also present, just fell away with nothing but praise and
Mm-hmm.
admiration for this woman of God,
Yeah. That's awesome.
like Mary Magdalene.
Yeah. 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 The Lord, we just got to give our yes.
Yep.
And he can work wonders.
Amen.
So thank you for sharing
Thank you.
your story, Erika.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And thank you everyone for listening. Yeah. Feel free to share it with anyone that you think would be impacted by it. But I truly was. So thank you, Erika.
Thank you so much.